actually sort of like a letter of the law from the ICC.
Ну что ж, если кто-то не спит, я всех приветствую.
Well, so then perhaps, you know, the
Ну и тех, кто спит,
I mean, the umpires were
тоже
fantastic down there.
приветствую.
They were trying everything they could. You know what I mean? But they obviously thought the light was bad. But then when the rain was threatening to come
Сегодня
and everything,
я планирую
they then
закрыть
sort of,
здесь все, что еще не
you know,
закрыл.
they then thought to
Вернее,
themselves, right,
нифига
listen, there's this
не
massive
закрыть, а
black cloud
открыть.
coming up over the back.
Открыть все, чего
You know,
еще не
let's get
открыл.
off here, 'cause we've sort of like thought to
Ну
ourselves
и,
that this is
собственно
gonna be
говоря,
absolutely tipping down in about 2 or 3 minutes. Got off, and then, you know, then that absolute
начать уже зарабатывать
downpour hit,
нормальные
and then
деньги, а то
managed
из-за
to get
этих
the covering on.
мелких
So
поездочек,
perhaps then they could sort of
вы
like
понимаете.
think, well, hold on a minute, as you say, it's 12
Возможно,
o'clock,
позже я
it's dipping up and down. We might just sort of give it a little bit of
реализую
time
одну
like that.
штуку,
You know,
которую я
that's
давно
just-
хотел реализовать в DRG. Но так долго, так надолго, скажем так, я заглядывать не буду. Так, нет, так не годится.
Yeah,
Вот что
that's
бывает,
ridiculous
когда
as well.
управляешь
Yeah, 20
грузовиком одной рукой.
Must have been so good, Marcus. And actually, because Pakistan had rallied a bit as well in this test against the England attack, and because it had looked so juicy when England were reduced to 7-1, that it just felt like, oh, everything is set up for another cracker. That's where a lot of the frustration comes from, Tim.
Yeah, of course it is, and I think you know, in different times we want to see just good cricket on the TV. You know, we were blessed with it with the West Indies series. The first test, as you say, was a beauty as well, and we got some good cricket, what we wanted to see, and we continue to want to see that from the last test match. You know, should the weather be okay? Although I know the weather is still not the best it's going to be for the next week or so, isn't it? So we could be sat here, or you could be sat here next week's show talking about a very same problem because the weather is still not great.
The cricket has been good though. It's been brilliant. You're spot on there. That sets up to be a great
Какого
test match.
дьявола
Yeah,
вообще?
on 5 days.
Я его едва задел. Просто я хотел его подвинуть, чтобы заехать туда. Черт возьми. Все в этой игре против меня. Как всегда. Всегда все против меня. Шучу. DRG, там не все против меня, там я против всех. Тихо, мужик, да я туда заеду, открою эту штуку и дальше уже поеду.
Shelled one behind the sticks today off the spinner, but it's set up beautifully for next week actually, because I think the pitch will be very, very similar. It will do everything, and I think that the pitch is actually, we're talking about the groundsman, I think the groundsman should be congratulated because that was a belting pitch at Old Trafford. You know, spun, swung, it seemed, you could get your runs if you got stuck in.
Так, погоди, а что у нас с гаражами творится?
Standard.
Так, в прошлый раз я остановился на том, что...
On day 5 of a test match with England 7-1 in their first innings, and the natural reaction for most people is,
Значит,
what's the
еще
point?
можно
Why don't they just call it
нанять
off?
двоих
If
рабов,
you're Zach
купить
Crawley
две
and you
повозки.
made a half century today, and you're sitting in your hotel room now, how do you feel about that half century?
I'm sure he would feel a lot happier knowing that he's got another half century under his belt. Of course he would.
Так, проверять влом, насколько я помню, это не кадровое агентство. Ну да, я вижу, там Кенворт написано. Значит, это типа магазин грузовиков. Не то чтобы он мне уж очень был нужен, но я люблю, чтобы у меня везде всегда было все открыто. А в некоторых городах, что в Евро, что здесь, что называется, само это не происходит. Иногда нужно это делать таргетированно, чем я сейчас и занимаюсь.
I bet he felt better than Harwood Alam after an 11-year wait getting a 4-ball. I did feel for him as well. Most peculiar start, which was really interesting.
The belter, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. If there was a crowd there, I could just imagine you going, nipping off for lunch, and then sort of like, you'd come back and he was batting, you'd come
Так,
back to
отлично.
the wrong seat. Because he was facing square left. It was amazing. But I did feel so
I'll tell you what, he was even more extreme than Chandapur, wasn't it? And
Yeah,
you were
John,
playing
yeah.
with John Carr quite a bit,
Yeah.
I bet, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was completely
Peter Willie.
toes completely facing down the track, shoulders square facing down the track. But I mean, an 11-year wait. Hopefully, he gets another run out.
Just on that, can you even begin to imagine how you get yourself into that situation where you play like that, Marcus?
No, absolutely not. No, I just can't. At what point do you go through your practice and go, I'm going to stand straight on down the ground and think this is a really good idea? Another one that baffles me is like George Bailey. George Bailey went the opposite way and almost stood with his back to the bowler, and that was like.
Так.
Back to Zach Crawley, who has had a good start to international cricket, but has obviously been left out because of how England needed to balance their side as well.
Так,
You just
ну
wonder
это
when
все
you
кроме
need
одной,
luck in international
и
sport,
кроме тех
everybody needs a
DLC,
bit
что
of
у меня
luck
еще нет.
to
Ну,
succeed
туда
in
я
whatever
еще
it may be.
заеду.
Just how important coming back into
Сан
the side,
Рафаэль,
and that
значит.
session, and it might just
А,
change,
я его
change
открыл.
place.
Exactly. I mean, because he
нифига
was
не
after a
заехал.
ton there, He was after 100, I reckon.
Досадное
Because
упущение.
he could
Ну
have
ничего.
carried on, and I'm sure that Joe would have
Мы еще
carried
это
on if he was
поправим.
still batting. The way he was batting, the positivity, the way he looked to take on Yasir Shah, and also the seam bowlers in awkward conditions. He looks like a right little find for me.
So-
good attacking, tall, gets up his toes and just looks confident. Yeah, he looks good.
Does this feel, if Ben Stokes is fit and obviously everything is all right and Ben Stokes is back, does this feel as settled a top six, Marcus, as England have had for a while? Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Root, Stokes, Pope. Does that at the moment pick itself?
I think it's as close as you're going to get to a settled team. I think there's still people need to go out there and continue to cement places and score heavier volumes of runs to keep putting themselves in contention. I think probably more than anything else, you have 4, 5, 6 on nailed in, aren't they? I think, Root, Stokes, Pope, we're seeing obviously 2 of those are world-class players, and Pope is looking a very high-quality player. Then the top 3, I would say the opening partnership is looking is growing all the time. They're very steely players, both determined and not. They'd go about their business in a similar sort of fashion, and have done well and warrant a good run in the team. And obviously now you're seeing the likes of someone like a Zach Crawley, who's showing signs where you think, okay, this guy's got good character and he goes about his business well.
I tell you, chappers, if that wicket's anything like this one on Friday, I think Jofra Archer's got coming to it. I think
Right.
a little bit of pace on that. And if he bowls anything like, because when it did just harden up a little bit, it did actually start to carry and kick a bit. So not only was it sort of nipping at you, people were getting hit on the hip and sort of like, getting completely squared up and flying through to the keeper. So that's going to be England's
surely you've got to go
position.
the other way, Tuppers, haven't you?
What's that?
Or Darren Stevens, someone like that. Get
I saw he
Steve
got-
in on that pitch. He would have been horrible. Horrible to face.
I saw he got his 800th wicket or something, didn't he, on
Exactly.
Twitter?
He is made for those pitches. He would terrorise the Pakistani batting lineup.
Well, that's interesting. You
Well,
say.
in a normal summer, Marcus, but he hasn't been in the bio bubble. So unfortunately,
No.
that's the one thing that rules it
That's
out.
where they've messed up, isn't it?
Yeah. See, that is interesting for me, though. You see, because I know they went for Sam because a little bit a bit more in the batting, and they're 1-0 up and everything. And you do think that someone just putting it on that length like a Mohammed Abbas, but then is he trickier? Like Forty was saying, he gives him sleepless nights. He would have done, you know what I mean? But then surely Jofra Archer bowling at 90 miles an hour, surely that is trickier, isn't it, Marcus?
Oh, I'm not so sure. I would, in my time, I would always rather have gone to face somebody who's got a bit more pace on the ball because you have less time to react, so you don't end up just sort of following it around and it's going and it's nipping about. I was exactly the same this morning. I faced Darren Stevens and he's terrorised me for years, mate. Every time. Him, Dimi Mascarenas, Tim Murtaugh, all these people just knock it on top of our stump. It's horrible, it's filthy, but it's horrible to face. I hate it, but they do such a great job.
Yeah, and it is great to see actually, because I can remember playing in the era when if you didn't bowl at 9 miles an hour, you really didn't get looked at much. You know what I mean? Yeah. We had that sort of Angus Fraser thing, and then Duncan Fletcher. It had to all looking at speeds. It was all about speeds. If you're going to go to Australia, I know it's different conditions, what have you, but to be a Test class play, you've got to be in the high 80s and 90s, and it was refreshing to see Mohammed Abbas just coming in. And just the skill and the accuracy of it. And I'm sure he's actually not just trying to hit that wobble seam. I'm sure he's darting one back and he can do it a bit. But it was absolutely beautiful to see. It really.
But that insight, Marcus, is fascinating to say. If you've got that pace on the ball and you haven't got time to think about it, then that in some ways, to us, mere mortals who wouldn't be able to see one at 75 miles an hour, let alone one at 90 miles an hour. But that if you coming down at 75 or 77, you have that split second to think.
Yeah, you do. It's the problem is when these guys do they're lower pace clearly, but all modes of dismissal are in play every ball. So you could nick off. You could get bowled or you could get LBW. Every ball that they bowl, they're always in that sort of zone because it doesn't necessarily bounce over the top because they're slightly slower, so it doesn't have the sort of zip on it. Someone, Mohammed Abbas is absolutely perfect for that wicket as it was in this game. Someone like Vernon Philander, he would have been horrible on that pitch because he's very similar, where the seam is just wobbling down, one nips in, one nips away, and it's either hitting you on the shin or the top of the stumps, and it's absolutely horrible to face.
Do you keep Sam Curran instead of bringing back Jofra Archer then, Mark?
I wouldn't change the bowling attack. I think that's the perfect bowling attack for that pitch, personally.
Okay, well that's interesting. And what those fellas do with the boys were saying is just every ball examines your technique, isn't it, Marcus? Every ball, your footwork's got to be perfect. Sometimes at 90 miles an hour, it's sort of like, oh, blimey, crikey, and it flashes off to the boundary and you just sort of react to it. It was lovely to see. And you're right, it was disappointing because that Pakistan bowling line, I reckon, could have caused England some troubles with that. And we were so frustrated to see how it was all going to play out.
Inter Milan have beaten Shakhtar Donetsk 5-0 in the Europa League semi-final this evening. So the Europa League final will be Inter Milan against Sevilla. Romelu Lukaku got 2 of Inter Milan's goals.
He's scoring some goals, isn't he, over there?
He is, isn't he? Rugby Union Weekly here from 10 with Ugo Monye and Chris Ashton, and we are going to end Tuckers and Bourne by talking about one of the game's modern greats who this weekend announced his international retirement.
India need 4. Kulsekara bowls, he smashed it high down the ground for 6. Into the seething crowd it goes to complete one of the great run chases in one-day international cricket, let alone a World Cup. And Dhoni, well, they're all running out, there are fireworks going off, his teammates have come rushing out, and they're leaping all over him. What a way to finish it.
MS Dhoni scoring the winning runs in the 2011 World Cup final for India. On top of that, he captained India to the 2007 World T20 and the 2013 Champions Trophy. He is, Phil, a genuine great of the game.
Absolutely, up there with the best of them, you know, the Tendulkars and the Kohlis. I mean, he is an absolute legend in India, probably one of the coolest, calmest sort of cricketers I've seen, especially for being a wicketkeeper. They're usually a bit of a breed amongst their own, but I mean, he just oozed calm, probably one of the best white ball captains as well that I've seen, and you know, just one of those box office cricketers. Loved to take it deep, didn't he? A great finisher. It was almost like he was just saying, I'm just going to take it deep so I can hit the last ball for 6, you know what I mean? But absolute box office cricketer, and done so much for Indian cricket.
He could time a run chase, couldn't he, Mark?
Oh, that was his skill, wasn't it? I think that's where he's really made his name, that along with his sort of captaincy. But, you know, he always seemed to be going slower when most people would probably be a bit more frenetic in run chases. And would be thinking, right, you need to be getting a couple of boundaries here to get on top of this. But no, he just soak it up, run hard between the wickets, get himself into that position, and then seem to just build and explode, you know, with this ferocity of shots, these big sixes and boundaries. Well, this is easy now. You know, I know what I'm doing. What are you lot on about? You know, I've got it under control. But his calmness, I always admired his calmness. I thought it was exceptional. When he's captain,
isn't that calmness even more remarkable? That he's captaining from wicketkeeper, so he's not getting a break. All of that concentration whilst captaining the most cricket-mad country in the world, and the pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course, yeah. I think that's why, you know, we sit back and admire how calm he was. And, you know, you see little bits when you watch someone like Owen Morgan. You see little bits in Owen Morgan, don't you? Where it's very calm, calculated, under pressure. It's like, yeah, no problem. I've got control of this. You know, he just seemed to have, you know, ooze his confidence in what he was trying to do, and it was, I think, for any professional sort of sitting back and understanding the pressures of the game, admiring that was pretty impressive.
Quick, Tuffers.
And don't forget the helicopter shot. Never saw that beforehand.
Yeah.
Marcus, thanks for being with us. Thanks for giving us an insight into bulbs that I never knew we would ever get on Tuffers and Bourne. That's much appreciated. See you soon, Marcus. See you, Tuffers. Thank you.
Boys.
Miss Elliot, Tuffers and Bourne, we'll make it available as a podcast, and you can listen again via the BBC Sounds app. And that's exactly the same with the Monday Night Club earlier with Kieran Dyer, Dion Dublin and Charlie Adam. Rugby Union Weekly on the way here on 5 Live with Ugo Monia and Chris Ashton after the latest BBC News at 10 o'clock.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 10 o'clock. This is James Kelly. Opposition parties have called on the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to resign in the wake of the government's U-turn on exam grades in England, which will now be based on teachers' assessments. GCSE grades on Thursday will be awarded in the same way. Mr Williamson apologised for the distress caused to pupils. The move means thousands of students could now get into their first choice university. The president of the Association of School and College Leaders, Rachel Warwick, says the government needs to have more faith in schools and teachers.
I think it's very easy to point fingers of blame in these situations. I know from our perspective at our school, we represent 20,000 school leaders across the country. We feel the real issue is one of trust. You know, we would like a government which trusted schools and school leaders as much as I think students and their families trust school leaders.
Opposition protesters have been on the streets in Belarus again tonight after the beleaguered president Alexander Lukashenko held out the prospect of a gradual transition. The demonstrations were peaceful, coming after a day of strikes and walkouts. Here's Mike Sanders.
It could have been a carnival, the proliferation of balloons and red and white opposition banners in Minsk, but there was steely determination too. One placard showed President Alexander Lukashenko's trademark moustache dripping protesters' blood and behind bars. Doctors, subway workers and television station employees joined strikes. Workers at a military truck plant heckled Mr. Lukashenko when he spoke of change eventually, but now only over his dead body, he said. He left visibly angered.
A woman's appeared in court charged with murdering her 10-year-old son in West London. Dylan Freeman's body was found at a property in Acton yesterday. Olga Freeman, who's 40, was remanded in custody. It's been revealed that the former King of Spain, Juan Carlos, has been in the United Arab Emirates since his abrupt departure from his country. He left suddenly 2 weeks ago while being investigated over a corruption scandal. Cricket, the England captain Joe Root has suggested there may need to be some changes to the way tests are played to avoid losing so many days' play to bad light. He was speaking after the second test between England and Pakistan at the Ageas Bowl in Southampton was drawn with less than a day and a half's play out of a possible 5.
If the Test Championship used the same ball everywhere, maybe like a very light red ball, have a look at something like that. I'm sure they can trial it, but I do think we found ourselves in a week where we had very strange circumstances. I don't think there'll be many games where bad light plays such a part as this 5 days has.
Football Barcelona have sacked their manager, Quique Setien, 3 days after his side's humiliating 8-2 defeat by Bayern Munich in the Champions League. The former Real Betis manager was appointed in January and was in charge for just 25 matches. And the weather, lingering showers. BBC News, it's 3 minutes past 10.
This is 5 Live Sport.
Что они там делают?
5 Live's Rugby Union Weekly.
Right, hello fellas. Good to be back. Finally got some rugby under my belt and for us to talk about.
Been a while.
Жаль, далеко отъехал.
Too long.
How's the body in one word?
In one word, I can't
Roswell.
describe. It's not sore because they had absolutely nothing to do.
How many contacts did you
take? We don't need to discuss about that, baby. We'll leave that for the stat men. I don't need to be involved in that.
Right, that's Chris Ashton, that's Hugo Monya, I'm Chris Jones, and with rugby back, this is Rugby Union Weekly.
Rugby Union Weekly from BBC Sport, BBC Radio 5 Live.
So, gents, yes, finally we had rugby back at the weekend. What would you give it out of 10? What mark would you give it? I guess that's quite topical considering A levels and everything else. Are we going to bump this one up or pull this one down? Where are you grading it?
A 7 that gets adjusted down to a 4. No, I'll give it a 7. I'll give it a 7. And given that all that was going on with rustiness, I mean, no pre-season matches, we'll talk about all of the sort of variable factors. I think it was a pretty solid start. All things told, wasn't vintage, but it's up and running. 7 for me.
I'd say a 5, and I'd say that was generous. On the subject of results, if I'd have been involved in this right now, I'd have ended up with absolutely nothing. It would have been a disaster.
Too low to even get a mark.
Speaking of that, Jonesy, you'd have done mock exams. I mean, Ash, you'd have done mock exams. What were your predicted mock exams?
You know what? Like, I did this thing called the International Baccalaureate. So I didn't do A levels.
Wow. That's not in Wigan, mate. You don't get that's not available in Wigan.
Yeah, you get it in Wimbledon, but not Wigan. Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny one, but yeah, we ended up doing as a group, well, probably a bit worse than we expected, just because it was quite a new system. A few more schools do it.
What did you get?
There's 6 subjects, and then you get different points for different things. It's too complicated. Not too complicated, it's too boring.
You get Ashley.
I got double better than what I should have been predicted, just because I didn't really turn up much. And
when you're playing for Wigan at the age of like 6, when you're playing for Wigan at the age of 16, yeah.
I had other things on my mind.
Yeah,
my
I can imagine.
Was 21% attendance, something like that.
At school or Wigan? At school.
At school.
Okay, so a 5 from Ashley.
Yeah, what are you giving it?
I'm not being generous, I'm going to be empathetic. 7. Like, I think you've laid out all the reasons. I mean, the rugby wasn't great at times, but how good was it just to have it back? Just to be able to sit down, watch it, work on it, for you to play on it. I mean, you know, that's where I'm at.
It reminded me a bit, well, I went to the pub yesterday, right? And it's all a bit different. the game, the Northampton Wasps game was on, I thought, oh, we're just going to stand at the bar, watch the last 20 minutes. No, you can't stand at the bar. You've got to have a table, wait 10 minutes. Is there a table? Get it disinfected. All this stuff's going on. And then when you sit there and you're having a pint at the table in the end, you go, this is really nice to be in the pub. So you can either look at it two ways. You can go, it's the pub, but you can't stand at the bar, the atmosphere's rubbish, it's half full. Or you go, at least it's the pub. And that's kind of where I've got to with rugby. You could say there's no fans in the stadium, the intensity's not like it could be, there isn't that kind of atmosphere around the grounds, there isn't the kind of parochialism you get from the supporters, but still it's rugby, it's still a narrative. We can still talk about who played well, who played badly, and we're not just trying to fill our airtime talking about rugby politics and pay cuts and all those different things. I'm sort of looking at it optimistically and going, at least there's rugby, even though it's not as we know it.
Well, your weekend finished in a pub or a bar. Ashley's started in a bar, because that's where you guys got changed pre-match, you know. Everything's changed. I mean, tell us, what was it like for you Friday night, running out? How did it feel in game?
I mean, I was making my debut too, so it was already all new. Yes, you can bring up I've been there since March, Ooks. I know you can see that smile on your face. So it was already a bit strange, me being at a new team, new ground, new setup, but then to throw the COVID stuff in on top, it was like... Thankfully, we did like a rehearsal the week before, so we all had a good idea of what we were going to be going into, but I think Joe Marler actually prefers the bar. I think he just wants to be away from people a little bit more and just sit on his own. We had a lot of space. Everyone's like got two chairs divided up a lot further apart than what we would be normally. Everyone's together in one room, physios and everything like that. So yeah, I didn't actually mind it. It was good. The thing that got me was the fans. It's terrible. It is terrible.
Did it feel completely different?
Yeah, especially for a player like myself. When you're on the wing, you're close to it, and
yeah,
you can go in and out of it, and you can take a bit more of the atmosphere in because you're on the edge a little bit more. To have nothing, it's just like, yeah, it was boring. There's no atmosphere. It was, although we did a good job of making our own atmosphere. I did think it was difficult just to stay in it and enjoy it like I normally do.
Mind you, you've told many a story on this pod whereby you're so close to the fans it hasn't worked in your favour. You've had pints thrown at you and pies and all sorts. So you probably wouldn't expect that to Stoop, considering you play for Harlequins, but it's probably nice just to know that's most definitely not going to happen.
You say that, but I'd take that.
You take a pie in the face?
Minutes. Oh, I'd take it for 80 minutes straight if it mean we had fans in the place.
Do you know what was weird for me? I mean, I was actually commentating from the stands. And it was the first time, obviously, been in that position, but just being able to hear everything. I could hear calls, you could just see the relationships in terms of like the back three and the nines talking to tens. You could hear a bit of back chat, all those things. So, but yeah, it was actually quite nice. I mean, Jonesy, you weren't too far away from me. Could you hear all of that as well?
Well, what I found really noticeable, and actually I wonder if this was a staff were, all the replacements were, all the non-playing members of staff. It felt like there were quite a lot of Quins people in that stadium, even though it was clearly empty. The stand we were in, which is the main stand, I just felt as if, is that normal for the replacements and everyone who's not on the pitch to be making that amount of noise? Or did you think, right, whoever is in the stadium has to give some kind of noise and support because they're going to have a few more than Sale just on the basis of home advantage or, you know, whatever home advantage is these days?
I think you've got to create your own energy a little bit more, so we were part of that. But I think we felt it was working for the team, and it was helping the team, and we could quite easily hear on the pitch the amount of noise that the staff and stuff were making. And it did feel like there was a really big group of us in the stand. I think the Stoop's probably a good spot for that, for getting the echo and everything spreading around the stadium.
Generally speaking, where we're normally positioned on the gantry, we're right next to where the coaches are, and they normally are that loud, just they're not heard, of course, over 50,500 people, so they are very vocal. And Ashley, you and I we were at Ashton Gate on Saturday, and we were stood right next to where the Saracens coaching staff were, and I said it in commentary, one of the positives of not having crowd there is that every message the coach were trying to get on, and it wasn't personalised messages, it was every time they kick chase they were just shouting push up, whatever it might be, but the players are able to respond to it, and I really enjoyed that part of it, that's for sure.
I expected a bit more from the Saracens lot, actually. I thought they were quite quiet for normal.
Do you know what? I think it's a real challenge and test, an opportunity for us to be able to have a look at the teams with great cultures, great personal relationships, because you know what it's like, Ashley. Do you know when you love playing the way you play and you love playing for your players, as much as the crowd helps, regardless of that, you just go out and you enjoy your rugby, and it really gets shown. So the fact that guys have had to look more internal, look within the playing group rather than lean upon anything else. I think the teams that we've seen over this weekend and going forward, I mean, we can't be too harsh as critics on round one when no one's played a rugby game for 5 months, but I genuinely think that we're seeing the teams with the best cultures and love playing the way that they want to play.
5 Live's Rugby Union Weekly.
Question for you fellas. What do you think the overall penalty count was on the first weekend of rugby?
138.
Do you know, I think it is 138, but I think it's actually meant to be higher than that. 138, I think, is the official stat once they've all been adjusted down, but the penalty counts were way higher than that, I think, because in like the Leicester game, for example, they definitely were on 22 penalties conceded, and now officially they're on 17. So I think 138 is probably quite conservative. If someone out there does more stat work than we do, you know, as a stat specialist, please let us know why the penalty counts have been adjusted down quite a lot since during the game, because Leicester were definitely 20 plus, Sale were 20 plus, I think Bristol were around 20.
I'd imagine they'd only be adjusted down for the decisions as to whether it should have been a penalty or not.
Or they looked at it themselves and they were like, whoa, we can't let this go.
Exactly. They've been told by someone, just make them up. But there were, basically, we could say for sure there were loads of penalties, especially I think in those 3 games, the Quins game, Quins Sale, the Leicester game at Exeter, and Bristol Sarries. I think the penalty counts were through the roof.
I'm surprised that certain individuals, teams are taking so long to be able to adapt. I mean, that's me up in commentary without having hit a tackle bag or anything in aggression for 5 years. What's it like on the pitch, and how are you having those conversations? How are you working with the referees?
Well, it was very frustrating because it's such a stop-start game, and I feel it's very defensive focused, when previously I thought we'd been trying to make this game more entertaining. So now an example would be Chris Robshaw in our game. When he's coming off the back of a line-out and he previously has seen half a chance to overlook, he won't take it because he knows he's going to get melted, or he knows he's going to slow a chance of giving a penalty away from his own team and like won't be able to fold. But now on Friday night he saw half a chance and he was on it, and it was a turnover like within seconds, which then stops the attack again. It's a kick to touch, it's a line out. It's like, for me, there was no momentum in a good 3 or 4 games, all because of this slight rule adjustment.
I think it's a fine line, and I completely agree with you that sometimes, you know, some of those holding on penalties on Friday night, like Chris basically put his fingernail on the ball and then the ref was given a pen. But there's a fine line, because what we don't want to see is where I think the Prem fell into the trap season before last or so of just letting wave of attack just happen, and people keep the ball 30 phases without doing anything. But equally, holding on penalties, I think, are so tedious. What we want to get is an encouragement. I think we saw this especially in the Northampton Wasps game with those lads running amok in the Wasp back row, Young and Shields, and especially Jack Willis, is if you're good enough to get the ball, rip it away, then you get rewarded. And I think that's what Robshaw was doing really well. He was making a proper play for the ball. I want to see turnovers, but with the ball staying alive, i.e. a team winning it, turning it over, chance to counter-attack. You don't want to see turnovers that are constantly holding on penalties. So if the refs can get that right, I think this is going to be great. And I think the onus does fall on the players, but also the refs, as Rob Bax said afterwards, they'll be a bit rusty. They'll be getting used to this. And I think everyone's going to have to work with each other.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a conversation which we can analyse in like 2 or 3 weeks. We saw that seesawing refereeing effect in Super Rugby. This is week 1. And let's not forget, these law amendments have come from... These law amendments calling out for. So they're now just implementing the law. I totally know what you mean. I'd love to see more turnovers, more broken field rugby, absolutely, and I think we need to get to that. With regards to the point that you made in terms of players actually taking the ball, the whole point of defence is to get the ball back. So when players just cling on to the ball, great, but you actually want it back, of course you do. And I guess my third point is if we are seeing more penalties, traditionally players are kicking to touch, depending on where you are on the pitch. We see the most amount of our tries from lineouts. So it just creates an opportunity for players to be far more inventive. And we saw that in the Wasps game. We certainly saw that in the Gloucester game. We certainly saw that in the Exeter game. I don't think there's been a weekend where I've seen more first phase tries than what we've seen this weekend. And if that just means that people are actually pushing the envelope from an attacking sense and having that fine detail of their launch plays, then that's got to be a good thing.
5 Live's Rugby Union Weekly.
Right, Hoogs, you've already said how good Wasps were on the weekend, and we all know, we've all heard that Jack Willis...
Это было близко. Вот засранец-то,
which I was surprised at. But he's my player of the weekend. I just thought he was unbelievable. In fact, that Wasp back row, I think, is actually perfect for these new laws. Thomas Young, brilliant over the ball. Brad Shields, brilliant over the ball. And Jack Willis, one of the best in the business. But then in attack, they're all what I would call soft shoulder players. They don't just run into brick walls. They actually use a bit of field work, acceleration, and they try and keep the ball alive. So as a unit, I think they were fantastic. But Jack Willis, in front of Eddie Jones, I mean, the boy was so unlucky 2 years ago with his knee injury or ankle injury, I forgot which one it was now, but to come back in the way in which he has, not just him but the team, they're now 6 on the bounce and they're flying. They're really under the radar. Yeah, a lot of change, Lee Blackett's come in, but yeah, I mean, the Wasp machine charges on.
Do you remember when we spoke to Willis, who's at the RPA dinner? We did a pod there.
Yeah.
It was the day before the England squad for South Africa in 2018 was named. He got in that squad, then got his injury between selection and touring. You just wonder how things could have been different. Could he have been in the kind of Sam Underhill, Tom Curry, Lewis Ludlam, Ben Earl position now, where, in the case of the first two, fully fledged first names on the team sheet, in the case of the latter two, England internationals. He's that good, isn't he? Just hasn't quite had that bit of luck.
I don't think Eddie will give a second's thought than swapping those out and putting him in. The type of coach he is, he doesn't mind. If he sees its progress, they're in.
I think I've certainly been guilty of underestimating Wasps, maybe because they've got a small squad, they haven't got a huge amount of depth. But you look at their team on paper, it's miles better than someone like Leicester, isn't it?
What?
I think Wasps starting 15 is way better than for a team like people going on Borthwick will be able to revolutionise Leicester, and he might, but I still think there are massive holes in Leicester's team on paper.
I think the growth potential in Wasps is massive.
Yeah.
I thought Dan Robson was excellent. Jacob Umaga for the try, which wasn't a try, just him reading that line, I thought he played really well. And then having Jimmy Gopperth as a mentor slash another playmaker outside him, I think works really well. Then they've got a powerful runner in Fekito. It's just a really nice balance to it. When you've got Lima Sopawanga, who's on the bench, and then when he does come on, he goes to 15. I think they've got a great balance, and more so than anything, and I mentioned it earlier in the pod, they look like they're really enjoying what they're doing, and it just shows through their attack.
So on the other side of it, with Wasps being the best, some that probably didn't get involved as much as we'd hoped, with Manu and Semi Radradra. What a letdown that was.
I spoke to Jones on the way down to Ashton Gate, and I said, if I don't say Semi Radradra's name under 50, I think I'd have done well. I mean, the guy barely got a mention, but the game dictated that he wasn't going to get involved, and the same was for Manu. We had a little chuckle when AJ McGinty came on to change the game, and he throws a miss one about 6 foot over his head, opens up his ribs, and March smashes him. It's like it just wasn't their days. It just really wasn't, and that was the unfortunate thing about the weekend, that so many superstars but none of them really got going. It's actually quite nice to reflect on the weekend, and my player of the weekend being an English qualified young gun who should hopefully really break into Eddie Jones' squad in the next year.
And in terms of Radradra, I didn't watch the game in full. I listened to you guys in commentary actually on the way home, you and Sarah. Was that a similar story, that Bristol weren't using him, or was it just the type of game, the penalty count? Did he not get any ball to shine?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things. They did try on some set piece stuff, but by the time the ball got to him, it was too late, and Sarries were already up. He stopped it, or the rain just affected the handling. He was literally cut out of everything.
What about that kick chase he put on Maitland? That was the only time. I mean,
me and you were knocked out there, Rich. Quickly now.
Mate, genuine. I'm looking at the bench. The PPE, and I just need a stretcher to get me off. I mean, there was a big kick chase.
It hurt me. Well, you just got up and ran back.
I couldn't. I mean, it's one of these things. Like I don't necessarily get impressed by size and speed and power so much, because you see so much of it, and everyone is quick and strong and everything else. But watching him accelerate into that contact, I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to hurt someone. I couldn't believe they both got up. But you're right, he just shrugged it off. I mean, that was about the biggest impact he had in the game. Knowing
the type of player he is, the type of person he is, he'll be really frustrated at that, and he'll want to make sure he puts it right. I do think Bristol need to be a little bit better at getting it to him. When I was there with him, no matter where he was or where we were on the pitch, I would throw the ball or kick it to him.
Just kick it sideways.
It doesn't matter. Just throw
like
it to
schoolboy
him
stuff.
and you'll let him go.
5 Live's Rugby Union Weekly.
Ooze, when did we interview John Barclay during the lockdown?
It must be a couple of months ago now.
May, June.
Like it.
And he was kind of in two minds about what to do. Now he's officially pulled the plug on his career. Fantastic career, 3 World Cups, 76 Scotland caps, Calcutta Cup, Pro 14 title. I know he's a good mate of yours. How's it been for him coming to the end at last?
I think it's been tough, but like anything, the moment you make a decision, you can at least be at peace with it, you can move on. He's drawn a line under his career, and he's taken that decision. As to how he's got to that decision, I'm not exactly sure, but he's had an absolutely wonderful career. I said it on the last podcast, what a brilliant bloke he is, and a brilliant servant to the game. So anyone who's looking for brilliant candidates with a resume like that, not just in terms of what he's done on the pitch, but who he is as a bloke, then do get in touch. Wish him all the best.
I would take that career in a heartbeat that he's had. But yeah, he was always a competitor whenever I played against him. Just a real niggle. One of those players that always, are always going to turn up, whoever they're playing or wherever they are playing. And John was definitely one of those.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's having it tough on in lockdown, but we've spoken, haven't we, about what it's like if a player can't have that farewell. I mean, it's why it's good to see someone like Chris Robshaw get a little bit of a farewell, even though it might not be in front of the fans. You never know, might get them back in the next few weeks, especially with the lobbying that's going on with the clubs.
Versus England.
Oh,
Barbarians
nice.
play England, don't they? Oh, jeez, I'd love it if John could actually just get a game there. I'd play.
But that game could be great. That game could be great, that England-Barbados game, if there's fans and if you get these kind of players involved.
What are you laughing at?
You need a pull hamstring or knock yourself over in 2 minutes.
Do you remember that tour? 2012 to South Africa?
Not out.
Mate, this was honestly, it was such a frustrating tour. We just won the Prem. Feeling really good. I'd just come back from a really bad hamstring injury, and I didn't play. I wasn't fully fit. Anyway, signed off to go on this England tour.
Just got on there for the tour fee, but anyway, carry on.
Laddie said they wanted me to play that first test. I was like, great, brilliant. But we had a defensive drill, ball contesting drill, and I tweeted it again. I think it was Tom Youngs and Tom Waldron had cleared me out, and I just felt with that it went again. And you'd have seen me like running down the touchline trying to test my hamstring. Honestly, I was running like a one-legged donkey. Honestly, it was just horrific. So I missed the first test, They said, playing a midweek match, prove your fitness. I was pumped. Done so much rehab, got onto the pitch, 20 minutes into the game, I make a break, I'm one-on-one with the fullback, think about how I'm going to rinse him, get ankle tapped. I planted my face onto the fullback's knee and knocked myself out cold as the end of the tour.
We were all in stitches in the crowd watching.
It was disgraceful. I was so frustrated. I've got plenty of abuse because I've come on tour, played 20 minutes.
Your input.
That was it.
And talking about unfortunate incidents on a rugby pitch, did you see what happened to Cowan Dickey after he scored for Exeter on the weekend?
I have never seen anything like it. I know Cowan Dickey's a bit of an oddball, but that is wild. Just being sick.
I can only imagine that. Just like in the scrum, there's so much tension going through your body. You put in so much effort that at that point where you release. I mean, I've never seen anything like that.
Has he explained it?
He's tweeted, "Class to be back. Sorry for the," and then the chunder emoji, and then a cry with laughter face. But to be honest,
Yeah, that's him in
maybe
a nutshell. Just like crack on.
crack on, yeah. But maybe there'll be amateur players listening to this who would have played for the first time in ages. And when your fitness is stretched, you just feel sick. I just didn't think it happened to you guys at the top level. But there'll be thousands of amateur players as this who've been sick on a rugby pitch. I've been sick on a rugby pitch, loads.
It's rough. He's got playing. How good was he, by the way? Besides,
he's excellent. England's have good start. Top.
He was probably up till about 4 gaming, and then gaming.
Isn't he like ranked number 1 in gaming in the country or something?
He was on Call of Duty. He was ranked number 1 in the world.
Apparently, he went on holiday
in the world
with his missus. Didn't step foot outside. He's just got a room with a pool outside, so he could sit inside all week in game, and his missus got to sit on the deck with a pool.
That's beyond. But do you know what was interesting? During lockdown, he did a 24-hour marathon online of playing Call of Duty, whatever it was. And I was like, hang on a minute, I'm pretty sure he's just had a kid. Actually, how would you get away with playing a computer game for 24 hours when you got a kid? I just don't know how you do it. Like, it's amazing. Great dedication.
You've got to be good. That's the key. You've got to be really good. Say, look, I might earn some money from this.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can get around it.
If I said to Mrs. I'm like ranked top 10 in the world for FIFA, she would not let me just sit there with the console and just tap away.
Is that before your morning nap or your afternoon nap?
I've only had one nap today.
Right, thanks so much for listening to the Rugby Union Weekly here on 5 Live. This was a shortened version for the radio, so make sure you download the full podcast for loads more chat from the opening weekend of the Premiership restart. Don't forget to subscribe, but here on 5 Live, it's time for Colin Murray.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
With the 5 Live News, I'm Jonathan Keith. Opposition parties have called on the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to resign in the wake of the government's U-turn on exam grades in England, which will now be based on teachers' assessments. GCSE grades on Thursday will be awarded in the same way. Mr Williamson apologised for the distress caused to pupils. The move means thousands of students could now get into their first choice university. Opposition protesters have been on the streets in Belarus again tonight after the beleaguered President Alexander Lukashenko held out the prospect of gradual transition. The demonstrations were peaceful, coming after a day of strikes and walkouts. A woman has appeared in court charged with... Dylan Freeman's body was found at a property in Acton yesterday. Olga Freeman, who's 40, was remanded in custody. And it's been revealed that the former King of Spain, Juan Carlos, has been in the United Arab Emirates since his abrupt departure from his country. He left suddenly 2 weeks ago while being investigated over a corruption scandal. In sport, Barcelona have sacked head coach Quique Setién following Friday's 8-2 defeat to Bayern Munich in the Champions League. He was in charge for 8 months, taking charge of just 25 games. The club have said this is the first decision within a wider restructuring of the first team. Former Barca defender and current Netherlands manager Ronald Koeman is expected to replace Setién at the Camp Nou. Romelu Lukaku scored twice as Inter Milan cruised into the Europa League final. The Italian club beat Ukraine's Shakhtar Donetsk 5-0 and go on to face Sevilla in Cologne on Friday. The issue of bad light in Test cricket needs to be addressed, according to England captain Joe Root. Bad light and rain ruined the second Test against Pakistan at the Ageas Bowl, with only a day and a half plays possible across the match. It unsurprisingly ended in a draw. England will take a 1-0 lead into the third and final Test, which begins on Friday at the same ground. And two-time Grand Slam winner Simona Halep's the sixth member of the world's top 10 women to pull out of the US Open Tennis, which starts at the end of this month.
Available now on BBC Sounds.
On the ground. The peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you.
Investigating one of the most infamous friendly fire incidents of the Iraq War.
I heard the drone.
They're the only people that really know what happened.
If anyone's ever heard an A-10 before, you will know what that noise is.
Nobody wants to hear no friendlies. The A-10 is an amazing aircraft, but left to their own devices, they're dangerous.
It's 17 years, but this has stayed with them.
It's changed their lives forever.
On the ground.
Listen now on BBC Sounds.
Colin Murray, Monday to Wednesday night on 5 Live.
Hello everybody, nice to be back from the Crucible in Sheffield. Sorry to disappear for a fortnight, but you know what they say, the three most important things in life: education, health and snooker. If you've never tuned in before, it is really nice to have you along. Late night radio, I think, is such a special thing. It should be live, and from Monday to Wednesday I welcome you with open arms. It's always your show, so if you want to get involved, 85058 on the text at BBC 5 Live if you want to go that way. But I think with late night radio, it's about all being in a smaller club, so prefer the old-fashioned text if you can, 85058. Many reasons to use it too. Tonight on the programme, we once again welcome back the naked scientist Chris Smith. He's the virologist and lecturer who he's always my first call when it comes to gauging and weighing up and making sense of all things coronavirus. Once every 2 weeks we should really drop in with him in the show, because he'll sort of take all the big stories and say, okay, here's how it's read from this expert point of view. So many serious things to talk about tonight, from regional lockdowns and vaccine trials and test and trace changes, recent figures and how to read them, which I always never know. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is it got to do with it being a Sunday? Is it all those different things? But even though it's always quite serious things to talk about, we always have fun when he's on for whatever reason. So listen, hop on board. We'll put your questions to him as always, just like we did on the Common Sense Coronavirus call-in on those Saturdays over the summer. 85058 is the best way, as I said. And once he's here after 11, maybe sneak a few phone calls as well, give the number out there. And some changes for those who've been listening over the last, how long is it now? God, it goes quick, doesn't it? It's for like 6 months in that different earlier time slot. The lock-in has closed its doors for now, but it's not out of business. For those who don't know, we opened the bar up for, in the heat of lockdown from 10 to midnight when we were on earlier, and it really was glorious and vital and life-affirming, essentially like human connection at a stressed time. Loads of amazing guests and live music and community. We moved it, the lock-in 2.0, the midnight to one, and unfortunately it just wasn't the same. First of all, we were all too tired by the time the bar opened. It was more like, when your mate drags you out to a bar and you really just want to stay in and watch the TV. It was more like that than a big night out. So what we've done, I've suspended its license because I only want it to be like it was before. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a proper lock-in for a whole 2 hours when the mood takes us and the occasion calls for it. Imagine that, an Olympic lock-in, a Glastonbury lock-in, an election lock-in. You get my point. At least that way when we do it, we'll get to do it properly. So I hope that makes sense. And instead, from 12 each evening, we're going to offer up something different, and all of them definitely the type of conversation that late night radio deserves on a Monday. So that's tonight, obviously. Midnight in America. Amazing guests and all things American, which means over the next few months, real focus on the US election and US politics, which is one of my real passions. So tonight, it's day one of the Democratic National Convention, big speeches, big names, and the official confirmation of Joe Biden as the presidential nominee. So we go star-spangled every Monday night at midnight. But before that, and before the Naked Scientist, we got to begin tonight's programme with the news story that's dominating every front page. Did you ever get hauled before the headmaster and have to make one of those sort of like head down, sorry sir, groveling apologies? How's this one for you?
I'd never have expected to be in a situation where we wouldn't have an exam period. So, of course, I'm deeply sorry of the fact that actually we've had to take these actions.
It's the biggest story around. A major U-turn today in A-level grades. That's the Education Secretary for England, of course, Gavin Williamson, who previously defended the system was fair and robust. Today saying sorry to students, parents, teachers and their family for the real distress that has been caused. I witnessed it firsthand actually over the last week, which I'll talk about later. England, Wales and Northern Ireland have all announced U-turns in response to the backlash after thousands of results were downgraded by computer modelling last week. Students are going to now be awarded the grades predicted by their teachers unless they were lower than the ones decided by the algorithm. So why the change now? Let's ask Gavin to explain that.
So over the weekend it became clearer to me that there were a level of the number of students who were getting grades that frankly they shouldn't have been getting and should have been doing a lot better, and the evidence both from Ofqual and other external bodies was apparent that action needed to be taken.
He wasn't the only one apologising today. Here's Roger Taylor, not that one, the head of Ofqual, the exam regulator.
I would like to say sorry. We have recognised the difficulty that young people have faced coping with the receipt of grades that they were unable to understand the basis on which they had been awarded.
I know it would have been great if it was at Roger Taylor and we just randomly asked the Queen drummer for a comment on A-level grades. Northern Ireland was first to reveal the change in policy today when this morning Education Minister Peter Weir said plans to use an algorithm to calculate GCSE results have been abandoned.
There's no solution which is watertight or ideal, but I felt in the circumstances it was justified.
England and Wales have followed suit a week after the Scottish Government said it would reinstate over 100,000 exam grades following controversy in Scotland, allowing upgraded students to keep their awards. Labour leader Keir Starmer welcomed the climb down by the Westminster Government, but it was quick to put the boot.
This should have been thought through from the start. This problem has been there for months and the government hasn't sorted it out. It then came to the wrong decision last week, refused to change its mind until today, and now there's a huge amount of unravelling that's got to be done. But don't underestimate the distress and anger this has caused thousands of young people who've seen their futures all over the place over the last few days.
And they're really important to BTEC students. Now, they're not affected by today's announcement. Some are still waiting though for results that were due 4 days ago. Students like Ellie.
It leaves us in a lot of uncertainty because I don't know why we haven't received them yet. There's no clear answer, there's no clear explanation, there's no apology, and there's no update. So I don't know where to go to next. Like, I can't even let my unis know.
The exam board, which administers in Pearson, says it's urgently investigating. Right, Nick Airdeer, political correspondent, joins us now. Nick, it's been a palaver from start to finish this. Are any heads going to roll over it? And if so, who do you think is going to have to carry the can for it?
Hi, Colin. I'm not sure that any heads are going to roll right away. I think there's kind of, speaking to Tory MPs tonight, I think they're blaming basically a bunch of different people. So yes, Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, is coming for a lot of criticism, but not just him, his team as well. So Nick Gibb, who's the school minister, is getting some criticism. So are civil servants, like the permanent secretaries, the Department for Education, and so's Ofqual, the Qualifications Authority. And it's really interesting. I was on a briefing with Gavin Williamson this afternoon where he kept talking about the fact that he had asked Ofqual for reassurances that this system was going to be fair and had got them, and had asked after the Scotland issue whether the same thing was going to happen in England, and been told no. And I get the impression that the government's trying to basically push a bit of that blame onto Ofqual to try and get some off its own shoulders as well.
You always know in any situation, if a Prime Minister cuts their holiday short, someone's in real trouble. Any sign of Boris up in the summer break?
No, he's up in Scotland on his summer holidays. And my understanding is he had a call with Gavin Williamson and a few other ministers this morning to discuss this. But clearly, I mean, anyone that's been keeping an eye on this, which I suspect is many, many parents and many pupils and many teachers across the country, will have seen, it almost felt inevitable to me that this was going to happen. So, you saw some of the pressure building after what happened in Scotland. You saw on Thursday the sheer number of grades that had been downgraded in England. You saw on Friday Tory MPs getting really agitated about this, becoming really unhappy, and that just built, and it was like Scotland where there was a drip effect. You got a mixture of the angry parents emailing their MPs, the angry MPs then coming out in public. But, you know, as is often the case with these stories, it was the individual cases. You know, I was hearing some of those awful cases of kids who got grades that were clearly far below what they were supposed to get and were likely to get, and a combination of all those things has basically left the government with no choice. Had to announce this U-turn today, and let's be under no doubt, it's a huge U-turn, because it was just last week that Gavin Williamson, any chance he was getting, was telling everybody there isn't going to be a U-turn. We're not going to do the same as they did in Scotland and rip up the system because we think it's robust and fair.
Yeah, Matt, you can hear the beeps, can't you? Thank you very much, Nick. I really appreciate that. And it's interesting. The reason why people are angry is because it has really emotionally affected whole family units. I was working with a guy this week, and I was in very close company with just 4 people working on the snooker for Eurosport, because that was me, Jimmy White, a girl called Neve, and a cameraman called James. And James's 18-year-old daughter was awaiting her exam results, and we're going to give her was just the stress he had that week, you know, wanting the work they put in, you know, wanting what's best for your daughter, the work that she'd put in, having to deal with a teenager going through major stress. And without getting too in generalisms, I'm talking now, we do know the stress, the major stress that can be caused on teenagers about education and exam results and what it can lead to. So even just to see one case, let alone the hundreds of thousands of them, you know why there's so much anger there. The A-level results process is confusing at the best of times, but this has been crazy. So we've drafted in someone to help us just to explain a little bit more. Joel Arbour is former Pro-Vice-Chancellor at the University of Central Lancashire and now works for Sums Consulting, a not-for-profit higher education consultancy. If you've got questions, 85058. Hiya, Joel.
Hi.
That is the origin of the anger, because within every family unit that has been affected, it has caused major heartbreak and stress.
Absolutely. And you can't underestimate the impact that this has had on the individual and their families. And if you think of education as the key to social mobility, I think that's why it really hurts and why there has had to be an amazing climb down on this. And just listening to the last part of the conversation, I'd absolutely agree that this felt inevitable. And the drip feed, sure. But realistically, it was inevitable from the very, very start when A-levels and GCSEs as examinations were cancelled back in March. Now, that's happened have been their success has been jeopardised here in order to keep a cohort at the level as a whole that it should have been.
I know you'd used the word inevitability, which you've used again and agreed with. Social mobility is right at the top of the list of this, that bright students from disadvantaged backgrounds can get a fair break, because there's so many other parts where they're not going to get a fair break. There's so many other things where we have social inequality, and you know, and the algorithm process for preventing that. As I said, you can understand the anger that you've heard across the board, Joe.
Well, A-levels have always been seen as the gold standard. Only this year, those individuals, those students, didn't get the chance to prove what they were able to do. They were instead judged by previous cohorts that had been through their school or college. And if you went to a school or college that hadn't done particularly well, then you were doomed from the beginning, however capable you were going to be of getting outstanding A-level results.
Let me bring some people in to talk to you, Joel. Amy's in Manchester, wants to go to Lancaster University to study medicine. Hi, Amy.
Hiya.
You're not letting yourself in for all sorts. You're not going to do like 8 years or something like that.
Yeah, it's 5 years at university and then 2 years as a junior doctor, so it's quite a while.
Good, you'd be working by your 48, Amy. Right.
Yeah.
I'm only joking. Right, talk to Joel. What do you want to ask him?
Yeah, so one thing that the situation that I'm in at the moment is I'm an external student at my college, and my CAG grades that were submitted, I feel slightly lower than what I'd hoped for. And I'm just seeing if you have any advice for external students in similar situations to me with regards to, speaking to universities about like reapplying for universities. It's the second time now so I'm just seeing what advice you have really for external candidates.
Yeah, and I do feel for you, Amy. It's a very, very difficult situation for you. If the CAG results aren't what you needed to get into Lancaster, that is going to be a real challenge because you've chosen medicine, which is about as selective as this gets. What I would advise you to do is think creatively and talk to some universities, because there are other routes to getting to study medicine. So there are graduate entry pathways, and you could talk to universities that do biomedical science, for instance. So at certain institutions that do biomedical science, you can do a BSc and then move on to a medical degree afterwards, not necessarily starting from the beginning. You've got something in your pocket that takes you a proportion of the way there. The other thing to consider are that there are foundation entry pathways that can, again, help you to get a lever into the medical profession. It's not straightforward, it is about as competitive as it gets. But in short of sitting those A-levels again, which I'm sure you won't want to do, it's a really challenging path. But you've got to be creative and look for those different avenues. There are all sorts of different pathways into medicine, not least because there are new funded medical school places that are starting.
Amy, how are you finding as I was saying earlier about my friend's daughter who go through very similar, actually just looking through what you got and what you were given and all sorts. How have you found the experience in terms of the stress it's put in the family?
Yeah, it's been quite a stressful week. I'm lucky that I do have a strong support system around me, so that's helped a lot. I must admit, I think I've been on an emotional roller coaster over the past week, as I think most A-level students have. I can't say it's been an easy time. I think one thing I found useful is speaking to my friends and other students in similar situations to me, just to ensure that you're not alone in times like this. But yeah, it has been stressful, and I think the fact that the government have made this U-turn tonight, I think it has helped a lot of students to feel a bit better about the situation.
You must work really hard, Amy. You're obviously just listening to you talk, and you're incredibly driven. You put a lot of work in, right?
Yeah, it's been a tough few years, yeah.
Right, but you know what? That's the key. Like, happiness in life will not work out for you based on everything working out ideally. Like, nothing ever is going to work out ideally, whether it's something like this hitting you in the face as a teenager, having to go through coronavirus or whatever it is. So don't let it get to you too much, because you'll find a way through hard work and being a good human. So don't let it feel like everything, because your life will go all sorts of places. Yeah,
I think a lot of people have said that to me, just try and stay positive about it, which is what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, definitely.
You're clearly passionate about what you want to do, Amy, and just so look at those different pathways. There are all sorts of things out there to help you into medicine. It's not how things used to be.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy days. Does that get us free consultations when you make it? Can we keep you on record, yeah?
Yeah, that's fine for me.
Good. Happy days. All right, you take care, Amy.
You too, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, Amy.
Joel, I don't want to rush through anyone. We've got 3 other people want to talk, so if we have to wait and go after 11, are you okay to stay a bit longer?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. We'll do an extra 5-10 minutes, because it's only Dr. Chris Smith after on coronavirus, so he can wait. So that doesn't matter. Martha's in Bradford. How you doing, Martha?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
You've got one of those names that when you see it, you automatically think of Martha, My Dear, by the Beatles, which you might be too young to know. But when someone has a name that's it's in a famous song, so it always goes into mind. Right, you're in Bradford. You're on with Joel Arbour, who's just the person to ease your fears or answer your questions. What do you want to talk about?
Basically on results day, initially I was rejected from both of my unis that I applied to, but now with this new U-turn today, it's looking like I will receive the grades that I need to get into my firm. So I was just wondering, what do you think the likelihood is now that people will be able to go to their firm unis? Because obviously I'm worried about unis that are filled to capacity and are now having to scramble to find people places.
Well, those are all great questions, Martha, and I think it's fantastic that this turnaround, this U-turn is going to work out for you. You're going to get the grades that you wanted, the grades that you needed to get into university. It's an inexact science. So you have entered into a contract with a university. They have made that conditional on you getting grades. You didn't think you got them, now you've got them. You're in a much stronger position now you've actually got the results, or when you will receive them. So the advice from UCAS is very, very clear. Sit tight and they will be writing to you. Their starting point is writing to the university that you've got a firm offer with, because they need to look at their capacity issues. What I would say is, sorry, can you tell me what subject you're studying and where you want to go to university?
I want to study drama at Manchester.
At Manchester University of Manchester, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so University of Manchester, very popular university, and drama is one of those subjects that needs space. You need studio space to be able to do that. So the challenges you've got there are around how that university is coping with the impact, the social distancing impact that comes with COVID-19. Because on top of the usual limitations that they would have for the capacity of any program, they're now having to deal with this extra dynamic. So they will need to consider where they're at in terms of the capacity of their cohort, their space, their timetabling, whether there are lots of Marthas that have managed to get the results that they'd hoped for, because it's possible that they could run a second cohort if they've got sufficient numbers of people that are in your situation. Or it could be that they come back to you and say, we haven't got a place for you in 2020. So then you've got different options, because what I can tell you is that there are lots of universities around the country that have capacity. There really are. There are places for people, particularly in arts subjects, which have been less popular to apply for in the last couple of years. So there are places out there. It depends on how set you are on going to Manchester and how set you are on going in 2020. Because the alternatives for you are to go somewhere else this year, because believe me, you'll get a place. If you've got good grades, you'll get a place. The alternative is, with those grades in your back pocket, it's a buyer's market for you next year. You can be amongst the first to apply for the 21 start, and actually you've pretty much got your pick. The fact that Manchester won't potentially be able to honour your place this year would give you an advantage in terms of getting into that institution next year. They will do everything. If they can't accommodate you this year, and that's I can't possibly answer whether or not that's feasible. What they would do if they had to let you down this year, they would do everything they could to secure you as a student next year, because they do.
Does that so would that mean you say take a year out at this stage, Joel?
Consider your options.
Take a part-time job.
It depends on your personal circumstances. Right. If you're determined to go to university this year for whatever reason, and you've got a bit more flexibility on where you want to study, you're not dead set on being in the centre of Manchester, actually you've got scope. There are places this year. If, on the other hand, Manchester is it for you and you had your heart set on going there and are determined to go there, you've got a lot of scope to get in next year and a long application process ahead of you. If you can find something if you can do some work or do something that will fill the next year for you, potentially do another qualification whilst you're waiting.
Yeah. I mean, I think I am thinking of the moment of taking a year out and gaining some more experience and then maybe reapplying next year. But yeah, that's something to consider.
I think it's an interesting choice, particularly if you consider that COVID restrictions will mean that actually in a what is a fairly physical course like drama, you have quite your actual practical work will be quite limited in this coming year. So it might actually, for you as an individual, it might be a better option to wait that 12 months. And not what you necessarily planned to do, but hey, this year planning has gone out of the window for everybody.
You're right, Joel.
Exactly.
You're right, Joel. It's different for everyone, isn't it? Because everyone's personal circumstances are different. And also, uni's just not about education. It's about maybe the first time, I'm guessing, Martha, you'd live away from home, right?
It would be, yeah.
Right, and you want to do that when you're 18. You're like, you can't wait to do it. So, no matter, you can't wait to get in. There may be drink taken. on that drama course. And you know, that's part of it as well. It's about becoming a butterfly. You know, it's about becoming a young adult and, you know, getting your heart broken and whatever it is. You know, so it's all that stuff as well, Joel. So it's all mixed in.
That's right. It's a rounded learning experience, and I think that what you should do in your research when you're looking at alternatives, either for this year or next year, take a deep look into how each university that you're considering is actually dealing with the challenges of COVID. Because we're seeing a real variety at SUMS, a real variety across the sector. Universities are doing what they can to open up as best as possible and give particularly freshers that rounded experience with as few limitations as they can. But it's not a consistent piece across the sector. So take a look, see what's available at each university. I know the onus is on you to do the research, but it will be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that good, Martha?
Yeah, thank you very much. Those are great points.
Yeah. But just before you go, do you want to be an actress, or do you want to be a director? Do you want to be a writer? What is it you're going to do?
I want to be an actress, yeah, but like I'm very open to the directing and everything, yeah.
Good, because you do realise you've made a real error here. Coming on national radio as an 18-year-old when you want to be a famous actress, because when you make it, Martha, this is the clip we're going to drag out and play. It'll say, Martha's just starred in the 18th Marvel movie, but here's a clip of her worrying about her A-level results.
I look forward to it.
Whatever happened to that Northern Irish presenter? Things like that, you know, that's what'll come out in about 10 years. There's only one other thing I'd add there, Martha, which is, when you get older, this will be Joel and I sounding like my two dads here, but when you want the moon on a stick when you're 18, you would have been the same, Joel, right? You just want everything now, and the idea of taking like a year out is awful in so many ways. But if somebody offered me a year out right now, as I sit here as a 43-year-old, am I 43? Yeah, as a 43-year-old, I'd have my bag packed before I introduced the news in 90 seconds from now. I wouldn't even do the next hour of the show. We dream at our age of having a year out, so if you can grab it and it's not going to damage your career, you know, if the thing that you're doing you feel like it won't damage it really, then it's not the worst thing. I'm not saying you should do it, I'm just saying there's a lot of advantages. When you're my age, you look back and go, do you know what, that's actually not a bad thing. It worked out like that, you know.
And remember, Martha, remember you're a different proposition now you've got the grades in your pocket. Seriously, that gives you far greater power than you had going into the uncertainty of this year's applications.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Don't worry, well, it's to be or not to be. You'll have to make the decision, but hopefully Joel helped you out a bit. Thanks, Martha.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Good luck.
Well, listen, we have Isabel and Thayla to talk to, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to just hold our horses for a little bit longer. Joel, you can stay with us, mate. I hate rushing through, you know, when someone needs some proper advice from you, and, you know, and also like to get to know people that phone up. It's late night radio after all. So we'll take a bit of news, and then we'll come back to the other side, and we'll do a couple more. We'll talk to a couple more people who've gone through this horrendous week with their families. When it comes to what's been happening with A-level grades, and we'll clear a few things up with Joel, and then the Naked Scientist Chris Smith will be here. Very conversational, interactive, topical show tonight, 85058 at BBC 5 Live, and then 12 o'clock tonight, Midnight in America launches. We'll do it every Monday night, and we're at the Democratic National Convention, which is like no other they've had before. It's like the most star-studded Zoom meeting you've ever seen. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
With the BBC News at 11 o'clock, this is Jason Kay. The Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has announced that A-level and GCSE students in England will be given grades estimated by their teachers after complaints that the original method used had been unjust. A new system had to be introduced after exams were called off because of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Williamson acknowledged that the controversial algorithm had caused significant inconsistencies. He also apologised to students for the distress caused. Similar announcements have also been made in Wales and Northern Ireland. Ed Balls, who was an Education Secretary in Gordon Brown's Labour government, said that ministers should have foreseen the problems.
Something went badly wrong, and we'll need to know why. But the idea that this has just become apparent to the Secretary of State in the last 24, 48 hours is laughable.
Principal of Birkenhead Sixth Form College, Mike Kilbride, said today's decision had come too late for some of his students.
They're going to unleash a different set of problems now. So this is not going to be the silver bullet that's going to cure all of the ills which have been developed in the last week. We're going to have a different set of problems, different people upset, different disappointments and different anxieties. This thing is an almighty mess, but it didn't have to be.
Kent County Council says it's unable to safely care for any more child migrants after a recent rise in the number of under-18s arriving alone. More than 400 children, most of whom arrived in Dover by small boat, have entered the authorities' care so far this year. The council says the responsibility should be shared across England. More than 70 staff at a dessert factory in Nottinghamshire have tested positive for COVID-19. The company has said they'll continue testing all the people who work at the site in Newark. Dido Harding, the current head of the NHS Coronavirus Test and Trace Network, is to lead the government's replacement for Public Health England. The new Health Protection Institute will be launched tomorrow and will focus solely on pandemic preparedness after PHE was criticised for abandoning testing for COVID-19 in the community too early. A woman's been remanded into custody after appearing before magistrates in West London, charged with the murder of her 10-year-old son. Olga Freeman, who's 40, will appear at the Old Bailey on Wednesday. Scientists in the United States believe Death Valley in California has registered the highest temperature ever recorded on Earth. It was recorded yesterday and is now being verified. Sharu Shahani reports.
It's called Death Valley for a reason. Regular searing temperatures would kill most living creatures if they dared to venture out of the shade. Furnace Creek in the Californian Valley registered a temperature of 54.4 Celsius. American scientists say it could be the highest ever reliably recorded on Earth, after disputes over previous readings taken in Libya, Tunisia, and Death Valley itself.
In football, Barcelona have sacked their coach Quique Setien. The team lost 8-2 to Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarter-finals on Friday. And that's the BBC News at 3 minutes past 11.
BBC Sounds. Grab an ice lolly, fill up the paddling pool, and turn up the music. It's time to celebrate summer with the Sunny Day Dance Mix. Back-to-back upbeat tunes to ease you into the night or brighten up your day, whatever the weather. The Sunny Day Dance Mix. Listen on the BBC Sounds app.
Colin Murray, Monday to Wednesday night on 5 Live.
Hello again, you're live on 5 Live, a big virtual hug. If you're just tuning in, I'm Colin Murray, and from 12 tonight, and every Monday night, it's midnight, in America. In many months, over these next lot of months, there's going to be so many things going on with the US election, building up the Super Tuesday at the start of November. Tonight sees the start of the Democratic National Convention, was usually a party of balloons and hype and hysteria and flag waving, but now it's, as I say, it's just like a Zoom call. You know, like it's just only Barack Obama's on the Zoom call, which would be amazing, by the way. Nonetheless, very important. We're going to be there from midnight. We've got an amazing lineup of guests, so really looking forward to that. Chris Smith, the Naked Scientist, will be with us in 5 or 10 minutes from now. But if you're listening just before the news, we were talking to a whole bunch of students who've been affected by this whole A-level fiasco, and the former Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University of Central Lancashire, who now works for Sums Consulting, a not-for-profit higher education consultancy. Makes him sound quite straight-laced, but he's not. Joel Arbour, how you doing, Joel? It's not a good intro for you. We need to work on that, right?
I know. First time caller.
Exactly. It's a bit dry. We need to work on it. What's your hobby? What do you do for fun?
I play in a rock and roll band, and I watch baseball, so a whole host of strange stuff.
Who's your team?
Cincinnati Reds.
Oh, well, there you go. So you haven't had much love, really. You haven't had much...
Not for some
love.
years, actually.
Right, yeah, I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan, fanatical.
Oh, same old, yeah. Well,
right,
I've been to the Rogers Centre.
Sky Dome, how dare you use the corporate sponsorship? That'll lose his listeners, that little 30 seconds. But there you go. You see, let me introduce you again. Please welcome Joel Arbour, former Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University of Central Lancashire and works for a not-for-profit higher education consultancy. Big baseball fan, and he's in a rock and roll band. Joel, how you doing?
Oh, I'm great. That's much better.
Right. And we're talking to 18-year-olds here who, now they know you're in a rock and roll band, they will be a little bit more comfortable, right? So, Isabel is in Ashford. How you doing, Isabel?
Hiya, you're right.
It's good. I'm some for rock and roll band on, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think I'm too nerdy to belong to the rock and roll band group, to be fair.
Listen, black t-shirt,
there you go.
you're in. It's as simple as that. Black t-shirt and an attitude is all you need when you're 18. Right, so you wanted to go to Cambridge. That's you wanted to go to one of the daddies. One of the big daddies,
yes.
right? So it's about a lot of stress in that because I'm guessing if it doesn't begin with an A, you're not going to get in there. So talk to Joel.
Oh, right. So, my calculated grades that I got given were A, B, B, despite having not been given a B since the middle of year 12. And then my teacher assessment grades, my mock results in January were A star AA, and then I got my teacher assessment grades through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got 3 A stars.
Fantastic. Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
what a roller coaster that is.
But
exactly.
I'm just wondering, you don't apply to Oxford or Cambridge unless your teachers think that you're capable of the best.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
And so every single student these very oversubscribed universities has just basically, I imagine, achieved the conditions of their offer. I really, really don't want to be deferred a year. If I do not go this October,
Okay.
Let's take that separately, right? So I want to we will talk openly and seriously about that because I know it feels like everything in the world right now, but we've talked about this a little bit earlier. But Joel, on that and the different system here and how it works getting into Cambridge.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Isabel, congratulations, because any way you cut it, that is absolutely outstanding.
Way too intelligent for this show.
The three A stars that your centre assessment grades are going to give you will change your life. So that's fantastic. I can also appreciate just how stressful this has been because there's very, very little margin for error.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to anybody at Cambridge since you got the disappointing grades through last Thursday?
I have. I got on the phone and then I've spoken to someone and I've been in fairly regular email contact with someone. I think I emailed them 3 minutes past 4 today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you will be in the same boat as many people. They could only last Thursday. They could only deal with what was in front of them.
Yeah.
The challenges that they're facing are again around capacity in what are very, very limited capacity scenarios for them. But with 3A stars, actually, you're a wonderful proposition. Not least because they wanted you. Cambridge don't make offers willy-nilly. If they make you an offer, they really want you to succeed. They believe you can succeed there. Now that you've got the 3A stars, it's the time to re-engage because there are different ways in. Cambridge is a diverse place. There are many, many colleges, as you know, and you'll have been accepted to study at a specific college. And it might be... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've I didn't get placed with a specific college. So one college is handling my paperwork, but I don't actually know which one I'd be with permanently yet. But that doesn't really matter.
Well, no, indeed. In many ways, that gives you more scope because you're open to going to whichever college rather than
I'll camp on the lawn.
Yeah, exactly. and as I've been trying to tell people this evening, the fact that you've got the 3A stars that you know are yours coming in the post at some point, that makes it a totally different proposition. So there will be other students whose centre assessed grades didn't make the cut. You've also got to consider how many people were taken on the course that you wanted to study last week at Cambridge. The difficulty you've got with Oxbridge in the round is they have very, very limited space for undergraduate students. It's unlike many universities, it's not their core business. It's just a part of what they do. So what you need to hope, and I love the fact that you're uncommitted to a specific college, you need to be flexible and you need to have your elbows out. You need to be as bold as possible on the telephone, speak to them as much as possible, speak to an admissions tutor, get hold of somebody and talk them through your story, talk them through your 3A stars, because you are a proposition they wanted before A-level results day, and they're going to want even more now you've got your 3A stars.
Yeah.
The fact that you want to go this year, fantastic, because not everybody will. Some people will want to defer to next year because of the restrictions of COVID, and they'll have seen the stuff that Cambridge has said about only delivering the lecture material online this year.
Yeah.
And that won't be for everybody, but you're determined to go, and you've got the goods. So be confident. Go for it.
You have no idea
Use your
how much I
passion.
needed that pep talk,
Yeah.
honestly.
Do you know what, Isabel, do you know what those grades will become in a year from now, though? The A stars. Still A stars.
Exactly.
Ain't changing. So talk to me. Why, if I don't get in this year, the sky's going to fall down? Why?
Oh.
You tell me why. You give me one good reason why, and I'll say you're right. But I bet you can't give me a reason why the world's going to stop spinning.
Because I'll die of boredom. Honestly, you're all cool. You all come from like cool places, but I'm sitting here in my tiny village in Kent. I got one shop. I can't go on like this. I haven't even got a Primark.
Right, hold on. Well, first of all, you don't need that. I'm sitting here in a basement flat, right, doing this show from
Fair
mine.
enough.
I'm incredibly boring, but I know what you mean, right? Because the itch to get out into the world, which is what we were talking about with Amy and Martha, and it's like, the itch, just let me get out of this damn place, and it doesn't mean you don't love your family, and it doesn't mean...
No, and it's a beautiful bit of the world.
Yeah.
But...
Well, here, why? I know it's difficult at the moment. It's not necessarily going to happen, but you can't rule out maybe with a friend finding a city to spend 6 months living short term, working part time, and just kind of like. So the problem is, in any other era, that would be great, but you also have to deal with the aspect of not being able to go out as much and stuff. But like the parks, So there's, of course, you can. I get that it seems like everything, and it is a lot. It is a lot, but it isn't everything. It isn't everything. Listen, I'll tell you about a boy who got kicked out of, he was asked to leave a grammar school, right? And he had to leave. Then he went to high school, and he was indefinitely suspended from that high school. And he left with a B and 3 C's. And so actually wasn't even there the last 3 months before the GCSEs, but was only allowed back in to sit them. And he went on to do all right. He's a gobby Irish guy, but he went on to do all right. You just,